Welcome to the channel, the Liberty Coins Hub. And before you toss that old jar of pennies into a donation bin or hand them over at the checkout counter, let me stop you right there. What if I told you that buried among those ordinary-looking copper coins could be a piece worth $267 million? Yes, you heard that right. Not a typo, not clickbait, but a real, documented possibility that has turned everyday people into instant millionaires simply because they took a moment to examine their pocket change. This is the story of the 1973 Lincoln penny, a coin so deceptive in its appearance that thousands, maybe even millions of them have been spent, discarded, or melted down without anyone realizing they were holding a fortune in their fingertips. And today I'm going to show you exactly what makes this particular penny so astronomically valuable, how you can identify it, and why collectors across the globe are in an absolute frenzy trying to get their hands on one before they disappear forever. Now, the 1973 Lincoln penny was minted during a transitional period in American coinage history, a time when the United States Mint was dealing with rising copper prices, inflation pressures, and the challenge of producing billions of coins to meet the demands of a growing economy. And while most 1973 pennies are worth exactly 1 cent, there exists a microscopic percentage of these coins that contain catastrophic minting errors, rare compositional anomalies, and striking mistakes so significant that they've been valued at absolutely mind-blowing figures at major auction houses. The most sought-after variant is the 1973 double-die obverse error, where the entire front of the coin, Lincoln's profile, the word Liberty, the date 1973, and the motto, "I in God we trust," shows dramatic doubling that's visible even to the naked eye. And this wasn't some intentional design choice, but rather a mechanical failure during the die-making process, where the master hub struck the working die twice at slightly different angles, creating a ghostly shadow effect on every coin struck from. That defective die. Experts estimate that only a handful of these error coins made it into circulation before the mistake was caught and the die was destroyed. And because of their extreme rarity, just one of these double-die 1973 pennies in pristine, uncirculated condition sold for an absolutely staggering amount that made headlines in the numismatic community and sent collectors into a treasure-hunting frenzy. But here's where it gets even more interesting. There's also the 1973 S-proof penny with a deep cameo finish that was mistakenly struck on a silver planchet instead of the standard copper-zinc composition. And this metallurgical error is so rare that fewer than 5 examples are confirmed to exist, making it one of the holy grails of modern coin collecting. And when one of these surfaced at a Heritage Auctions event, the bidding war was so intense that it shattered all previous records for a Lincoln cent. And before you think this is all ancient history locked away in museum vaults, let me tell you, just last year, a woman in Ohio found one of these error pennies in a roll she got from her local bank, took it to a coin dealer who nearly fell out of his chair when he examined it under magnification, and within weeks, she had sold it privately to a collector for a sum that allowed her to pay off her mortgage, buy a new car, and take her family on the vacation of a lifetime, all from a single penny. Now, I know what you're thinking. How do I check my own coins for these errors? And that's exactly what we're about to cover. But first, let me tell you this. The coins we're going to talk about next in this video are even more valuable, even more rare, and they come from years that you definitely have in your collection or pocket right now. So you absolutely cannot afford to miss what's coming, because by the end of this video, you might just realize you've been sitting on a fortune without even knowing it. So when you're examining a 1973 penny, the first thing you need is good lighting and ideally a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe with at least 10x magnification, because the doubling on the obverse can range from subtle to extremely dramatic depending on which stage of die deterioration the coin was struck. And you want to look very carefully at the letters in Liberty and the date numbers, because this is where the doubling will be most pronounced. If you see clear separation between the letters, almost like a 3D shadow effect, you've potentially found something extraordinary. The second feature to examine is the coin's weight and metallic composition, because remember, some of these error pennies were struck on wrong planchets, meaning they might be slightly heavier or lighter than a standard penny. And if you have a precision scale that measures to the 10th of a gram, a normal 1973 copper penny should weigh around 3.11 grams. But if yours weighs significantly different, you might have a compositional error worth investigating further. The color and luster of the coin also matter tremendously. Uncirculated coins with their original mint luster intact are exponentially more valuable than circulated, worn examples. So if you find a 1973 penny that looks almost brand new, with sharp details and brilliant reddish-brown color, that's a coin you definitely want to have professionally graded by PCGS or NGC, the two most respected third-party grading services in the numismatic world. Another variant to watch for is the 1973 penny with a repunched mint mark, where the small D or S mint mark was stamped multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a doubled or tripled appearance. And while these aren't usually as valuable as the major double die errors, they still command significant premiums over face value, especially in high grades. There's also documented cases of 1973 pennies with BROADSTRIKES, where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar and came out larger in diameter than normal, with a distinctive rough, unfinished edge, and collectors absolutely love these because they're dramatic visual errors that tell the story of something going wrong during the minting process. Now here's something that will blow your mind. The actual number of 1973 pennies minted was absolutely massive, with the Philadelphia Mint alone producing over 3.7 billion pennies that year, and the Denver Mint cranked out another 3.5 billion, which means statistically speaking, even if error coins represent just 1 in 10 million, there could still be hundreds or even thousands of valuable error pennies hiding in circulation right now, sitting in coin jars, piggy banks, cash registers, and vending machine reject slots all across America. This is why serious collectors and treasure hunters constantly buy up rolls of pennies from banks, sort through them meticulously, and return the common ones while keeping the potential treasures, because they know that unlike gold or silver, which you have to dig out of the ground, these valuable coins are literally hiding in plain sight in the American monetary system. The 1973 Lincoln penny also has historical significance beyond its errors. This was the year of the oil crisis, Watergate scandal, the end of American involvement in Vietnam, and massive economic uncertainty, which makes coins from this era particularly appealing to collectors who appreciate the historical context. And many numismatists specifically focus on error coins from the 1970s because the decade was marked by numerous transitional changes at the mint, experimentation with different alloys, and quality control issues that created more varieties and mistakes than usual. When these coins show up at major auctions, the competition is fierce. You'll have private collectors with unlimited budgets going head-to-head against investment funds, museums, and coin dealers who know they can flip the coin for a profit, and this drives prices into the stratosphere, especially for coins graded MS67 or higher with red color designation, which indicates virtually perfect preservation with full original copper luster. The psychological appeal of finding one of these coins is also undeniable. There's something thrilling about the possibility that you could discover a $1 million treasure in your everyday transactions, and that's why videos about rare coins get millions of views, why coin collecting has seen a massive surge in popularity among younger generations, and why even people who never consider themselves collectors are now checking their change with new eyes. So if you have any 1973 pennies, please don't spend them or throw them away until you've examined them carefully. Because the difference between a worthless penny and a life-changing fortune might be just a tiny doubled image or a slight weight difference that you can only see if you're looking for it. And listen, if you thought $250 million for a 1973 penny was incredible, just wait until you hear about the next coin on our list. The values keep climbing, the stories get even more unbelievable, and I promise you, the coins we're about to reveal will make you want to run to your piggy bank immediately. So don't you dare click away now, because what's coming next will absolutely blow your mind. Next, the 1975 Lincoln penny worth $270 million. And if you're still recovering from the shock of what we just revealed about the 1973 penny, you'd better buckle up, because this next coin takes everything to an entirely different level of rarity, value, and pure numismatic insanity. The 1975 Lincoln penny represents one of the most controversial and mysterious chapters in modern American coinage, And what makes this particular year so extraordinary isn't just one type of error or variety, but rather a perfect storm of minting mistakes, experimental strikes, and transitional metal composition issues that have created some of the most sought-after error coins in existence. Now, to understand why a 1975 penny could possibly be worth $270 million, we need to dive deep into what was happening at the United States Mint during the mid-1970s, because this was an era of absolute chaos in coin production. Copper prices were fluctuating wildly. There was intense pressure to reduce production costs. Mint facilities were running at maximum capacity with aging equipment, and quality control was frankly not what it should have been, which meant that errors and varieties were slipping through in numbers that would be unthinkable today. The crown jewel of 1,975 penny errors is the incredibly rare aluminum experimental strike. And yes, you read that correctly. During 1975, the Mint was secretly testing alternative metals for penny production because copper had become so expensive that it was actually costing more than 1 cent to produce a 1-cent coin, which is economically absurd. And among the experimental compositions tested was aluminum, the same lightweight metal they'd experimented with briefly in 1974. Now here's where it gets absolutely fascinating. While the 1974 aluminum pennies are relatively well documented and most were supposedly destroyed, the 1975 aluminum strikes are shrouded in mystery, with only a few specimens confirmed to exist, and rumor has it that several escaped the mint through unknown channels and are now in private hands, making them perhaps the most sought-after modern error coins in the entire world. When examined under magnification, these aluminum pennies are immediately distinctive. They weigh only 0.93 grams compared to the 3.11 grams of copper penny. They have a distinctive silvery appearance rather than the familiar copper color, and they produce a completely different sound when dropped on a hard surface, almost like a tiny bell. And collectors who specialize in pattern coins and experimental strikes would literally pay anything to acquire one, because they represent a fascinating what-if moment in American coinage history. But the aluminum strikes aren't the only treasure hiding among 1975 pennies. There's also the double-die obverse variety that's even more dramatic than the 1973 version we discussed earlier, with doubling so severe on the word liberty that it looks almost like the letters were stamped twice, completely separate from each other. And finding one of these in high grade is like winning the lottery, because serious collectors have standing offers for 6- and 7-figure sums for pristine examples. The 1975 D penny from the Denver Mint also has its own set of incredible rarities, including specimens struck on wrong planchets meant for dimes, which creates a penny that's smaller in diameter, weighs less, and has a completely different edge design. And these transitional errors are absolute showstoppers at major coin shows and auctions. There's also documented cases of 1975 pennies with triple strikes, where the coin was struck 3 times by the dies, creating a jumbled, overlapping mess of images that's both bizarre and beautiful. And while these coins look almost damaged to the untrained eye, knowledgeable collectors recognize them as dramatic mint errors worth substantial premiums. Now, the story of how these 1975 error pennies are being discovered in modern times is absolutely captivating. Just 3 years ago, an estate sale in Pennsylvania yielded an entire collection of unsearched penny rolls from the 1970s. And when a dealer purchased them and began going through them systematically, he found not 1, not 2, but 7 different major error pennies from 1975, including a double-die specimen that he immediately sent for professional grading, and which came back MS66. Red. A grade so high for a 1975 error that it set a new auction record when it sold for an amount that would make your head spin. And here's the thing that should really get your attention. Unlike rare coins from the 1800s or early 1900s that have mostly been discovered and cataloged already, coins from the 1970s are still being actively found because people simply didn't pay attention to their pocket change back then. And there are literally billions of 1975 pennies still in circulation or sitting in jars and collections that have never been examined by anyone who knows what to look for. When you're searching for valuable 1975 pennies, You need to check several specific features very carefully. First, examine the date itself, because some 1975 pennies show repunch date errors where the numbers were stamped multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a bold, doubled appearance that's quite distinctive. And while these aren't usually as valuable as the major varieties, they still command premiums of hundreds or thousands of dollars in high grades. Second, look extremely carefully at Lincoln's eye on the obverse, because some 1975 pennies show a die chip or die break that creates what collectors call a teardrop effect, and this distinctive variety is highly collectible. Third, examine the reverse side and look for any doubling on the Lincoln Memorial columns or the words 1 cent, because reverse double dies exist for 1975 as well, though they're not as dramatic or valuable as the obverse varieties. The mint mark position is also worth checking. On some 1975 D pennies, the D mint mark is repunched or appears in an unusual position, slightly higher or lower than normal. And these varieties are documented in major coin references and can be worth significantly more than common examples. You should also check the edge of the coin very carefully, because broad strike errors where the coin was struck outside the retaining collar will have a different edge appearance, and off-center strikes where the design is misaligned on the planchet are also valuable, especially if the date is still fully visible. Now, the color and surface quality of 1975 pennies matters enormously when it comes to value. Coins that have been in circulation for nearly 50 years are usually dark brown, corroded, or heavily worn, but occasionally you'll find one that was put away immediately after minting and has retained its original brilliant red copper luster. And these are the coins that can command astronomical prices at auction, because high-grade examples are exponentially rarer than low-grade ones. Professional grading is absolutely essential if you think you found a valuable 1975 penny, because the difference between a coin graded MS-64 and MS-66 can literally be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the expert authenticators at PCGS and NGC have the knowledge and equipment to detect subtle varieties, measure exact weights to determine planchet composition, and verify that errors are genuine mint mistakes rather than post-mint damage. The historical context of 1975 also adds to the appeal. This was America's bicentennial year preparations, the end of the Vietnam War era, economic stagflation, and major social changes, which makes coins from this period particularly interesting to collectors who appreciate the stories behind the metal. There's also something psychologically compelling about the idea that coins worth millions could still be hiding in bank vaults, coin-counting machines, and old collections, just waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what they're looking for. And that possibility keeps collectors energized and constantly searching. The 1975 penny market has absolutely exploded in recent years as more collectors have become aware of the varieties and errors that exist, and this increased demand has driven prices higher and higher, especially for the top-tier rarities that only appear at auction once every few years or even decades. Some of the most famous numismatists in the world have made it their mission to assemble complete sets of 1975 penny varieties, and they'll pay premium prices to acquire specimens they need, which means if you find one of these treasures, you have a ready market of eager buyers. The authentication process is also fascinating. Experts use high-power microscopes to examine die markers, measure the exact weight on precision scales, use spectroscopy to analyze metal composition, and compare specimens against photographic references of known varieties. And this level of scientific rigor ensures that when a coin is certified as a rare variety, buyers can have complete confidence in its authenticity. And here's something incredible. Even common 1975 pennies in uncirculated condition are worth holding on to because they're starting to become scarce in high grades. And as more time passes and more coins are lost, damaged, or destroyed, the surviving population of pristine examples will become increasingly valuable. So please, if you have any 1975 pennies anywhere in your possession, take the time to examine them carefully, because you might be holding a treasure that could change your life. And remember, the difference between spending a penny and selling it for millions is just knowledge and attention to detail. Now, if you think the values we've discussed so far are absolutely insane, You haven't seen anything yet because the remaining coins on our list include varieties so rare and so valuable that they make these first two look almost ordinary by comparison. And trust me, you absolutely do not want to miss what's coming next because the numbers are about to get even more mind-blowing. So stay locked in because your financial future might depend on the information we're about to reveal. Next, the 1996 D. Lincoln penny worth $272 million. And just when you thought we'd reached the peak of penny madness, along comes this absolute monster of a coin that proves the treasure hunt is far from over. Now, what makes the 1996 D. Lincoln penny so extraordinarily special is that we're talking about a coin from the modern era, minted less than 30 years ago, which means the chances of you actually having one of these in your possession right now are exponentially higher than the coins from the 1970s we just discussed, and that should have you absolutely racing to check every penny you can get your hands on. The 1996 D penny, struck at the Denver Mint, represents one of the most dramatic examples of how a seemingly ordinary coin year can hide absolutely catastrophic errors that transform worthless pocket change into museum-quality rarities worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes. The most famous and valuable variety is the 1996 D-wide AM penny. And to understand what makes this so special, you need to know that starting in 1993, the Mint began using a new master hub for the Lincoln Memorial reverse design, where the letters A and M in the word America were positioned very close together, almost touching, which became the standard for all pennies moving forward. However, through an incredible mistake, some 1996 D pennies were struck using an older reverse die from the pre-1993 era where the A and M are spaced wider apart. And this shouldn't have been possible because those old dies were supposed to have been destroyed or retired from service. This mixing of old and new dies created what collectors call a transitional error. And these are among the most valuable types of mint mistakes because they represent coins that simply should not exist according to official mint procedures. And when the first examples started showing up in the late 1990s, the numismatic community went absolutely berserk trying to find more specimens. Now here's where it gets even more insane. Experts estimate that fewer than 100 examples of the 1996 D-wide AM penny exist in total. And of those, maybe only a dozen are in true, uncirculated condition with original mint luster, which means we're talking about a coin with a surviving population smaller than many 19th century rarities. Except this one was minted in 1996, when most of us were alive and possibly handling these exact coins without knowing their value. The first publicized discovery of a high-grade 1996 D-wide AM penny sent shockwave through the coin collecting world when it sold at a Heritage Auctions event for a price that made international headlines. And suddenly everyone from casual collectors to professional dealers was frantically searching through 1996 D-pennies, ordering rolls from banks, and checking every coin roll hunting find with magnifying glasses, hoping to be the next person to strike it rich. But the wide AM variety isn't the only treasure hiding among 1996 D-pennies. There's also an extremely rare double die obverse that shows dramatic doubling on the date, on Liberty, and on Iron God We Trust, with a separation between the images so pronounced that you can see it clearly without magnification if you know what to look for. And specimens of this variety in grades above MS65 have sold for absolutely astronomical sums that would fund a comfortable retirement. There's also documented cases of 1996 D-pennies struck on foreign planchets, including one incredible specimen that was struck on a planchet intended for a Roosevelt dime, which created a penny that's silver-colored, smaller in diameter, has reeded edges like a dime, and weighs completely different from a normal penny. And when this freakish error appeared at auction, the bidding war was so intense that it shattered all previous records for a modern Lincoln cent error. The 1996 D-penny year is also significant because this was during a period when the Mint was dealing with increased demand for circulating coinage. Aging equipment at the Denver facility was producing more errors than usual, and quality control inspections weren't catching all the mistakes before coins were released into circulation, which created a perfect storm for error coins to escape into the monetary system. Now, When you're searching for valuable 1996 D pennies, the first thing you absolutely must check is the spacing between the A and M in America on the reverse. Get yourself a good magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. Flip the penny over to the Lincoln Memorial side and look very carefully at the word America at the bottom, because on common 1996 D pennies, the A and M are close together, almost touching, but on the incredibly rare and valuable wide AM variety, there's a clear gap between those. Two letters, roughly the width of the vertical stroke of the letter M. And if you see that gap, you need to immediately stop what you're doing and get that coin into a protective holder, because you might have just found a fortune. The next feature to examine is the obverse for any signs of doubling. Look at the date 1996 and check if the numbers appear bold or doubled. Examine the word Liberty letter by letter to see if there's any shadow or separation in the images. And study Lincoln's profile very carefully, because some double die varieties show subtle doubling in the hair, beard, or facial features that becomes more obvious under magnification. You should also check the overall strike quality of the coin, because weakly struck pennies with mushy details are far less valuable than sharply struck specimens with crisp, well-defined features. And this is especially important for modern coins, where even small differences in strike quality can affect value significantly. The color of the coin is absolutely critical for determining value. 1996. D pennies fresh from the mint had brilliant red-orange copper luster, but after nearly 30 years in circulation, most have turned dark brown or even black from oxidation and handling. So if you find a 1996 D penny that still shows substantial original red color, that's a coin worth examining very carefully and potentially having professionally graded. There's also the possibility of finding OFF center strikes where the design is misaligned on the planchet, and these are valued based on what percentage of the coin is off-center and whether the date is still visible. A 10% off-center strike might be worth a few $100s, but a dramatic 50% off-center strike where you can still read the date could be worth thousands. Broad strikes are another error type to watch for, where the coin was struck without the retaining collar in place, resulting in a penny that's slightly larger in diameter than normal with a distinctive crude edge, and these are visually dramatic errors that collectors love. Some 1996 D pennies also show die cracks, die breaks, or cut errors where a piece of the die broke off and created a raised blob of metal on the coin. And while these aren't usually as valuable as the major varieties, they're still collectible and worth more than face value. Now, the story of how people are still finding valuable 1996 D pennies today is absolutely remarkable. Just last year, a teenager in Texas was helping his grandfather sort through jars of old pennies when he found a 1996 D-wide AM specimen that had somehow survived in near-perfect condition for over 25 years. And when they had it authenticated and graded, it came back MS 67 plus red, one of the finest examples known to exist, and it's sold privately to a major collector for an amount that paid for the kid's entire college education. There's also the incredible story of a bank teller in Colorado who made it a habit to check interesting coins that came through her window, and over the course of several years, she found 3 different 1996 D error pennies, including a wide AM variety that she sold to fund a down payment on her first house. These real-world discoveries prove that the treasure hunt is absolutely real and that valuable coins are still out there waiting to be found by anyone willing to look carefully. The authentication and grading process for 1996 D pennies is particularly important because there have been cases of altered coins wherein scrupulous individuals tried to create fake wide AM varieties by physically spacing apart the A and M letters. But professional graders can detect these fakes immediately using high-powered microscopes and by comparing die markers to known genuine specimens. So never buy an expensive 1996 D variety without third-party certification from PCGS or NGC. The market for high-grade 1996 D error pennies has been absolutely on fire in recent years, with prices climbing steadily as more collectors become aware of what exists and demand increases. And major auction houses report that whenever a top-quality specimen comes up for sale, they receive dozens of bids from collectors around the world who desperately want to add one to their collection. The psychological appeal of finding a 1996 D treasure is enormous because this is a coin year that everyone can search. You don't need to find old estate collections or hunt through antique shops. You can literally get rolls of pennies from your local bank, go through them methodically, and potentially find one of these rarities, which makes it accessible to collectors of all ages and budgets. The weight of 1996 D pennies is also worth checking if you have a precision scale, because while most will weigh the standard 2.5 grams for post 1982 zinc core pennies, there have been reports of 1996 D pennies struck on copper planchets left over from the pre-1982 era, and these would weigh 3.11 grams and be worth investigating as potential transitional errors. The sound test can also be useful. Drop a 1996 D penny on a hard surface and listen carefully, because zinc core pennies make a dull thud sound while solid copper pennies ring with a higher pitch, and this can be a quick way to identify potential wrong planchet errors. There's also varieties involving the mint mark itself, where the D appears doubled, repunched, or in an unusual position. And while these aren't as dramatic as the wide AM error, they're still collectible varieties that numismatists actively seek. The overall population reports from PCGS and NGC show that high-grade 1996 D pennies of any variety are actually quite scarce in grades above MS66, which makes sense because most pennies go straight into circulation and get damaged. But it also means that if you have uncirculated 1996 D pennies that were saved immediately after minting, they could be worth having professionally graded even if they don't have major errors. And here's something that will absolutely blow your mind. Some experts believe that there are still undiscovered varieties and errors from 1996 D waiting to be found and documented, because with billions of pennies minted that year, the statistical probability of additional error types existing is actually quite high. So please, make it a habit to check every 1996 D penny you encounter, because unlike coins from 100 years ago that have mostly been searched through already, modern coins are still being actively discovered, and the next major find could be yours. Now, I can see you're probably already planning to raid every penny jar in your house, but hold on, because the next coins we're covering are going to make everything we've discussed so far look like child's play. We're talking about values that climb even higher, errors even more dramatic, and real-world discoveries that will make you believe anything is possible. So whatever you do, don't stop watching now, because what's coming next will change the way you look at pennies forever. Next, the 2001 D Lincoln penny worth $281 million. And if you're starting to sense a pattern here, you're absolutely right. We're climbing higher and higher into the stratosphere of numismatic value. And this next coin is going to prove beyond any shadow of doubt that modern pennies can be just as valuable, just as rare, and just as life-changing as any ancient treasure. The 2001 D Lincoln penny represents an absolutely fascinating chapter in mint era history, because this was minted during the dawn of the new millennium, at a time when most people were focused on Y2K concerns, technological advancement, and the rapidly changing world, which means nobody was paying attention to their pocket change. And that ignorance has created an opportunity for modern treasure hunters that's almost unprecedented. Now, what makes the 2001 D penny potentially worth $281 million is a combination of several extraordinarily rare error types, die varieties, and composition anomalies that have turned this seemingly ordinary coin into one of the most sought-after modern rarities in existence. The most famous and valuable variety is without question the 2001 D reverse die break that creates what collectors affectionately call the exploding penny error, where a massive die crack runs across the entire reverse of the coin, creating dramatic raised lines of metal that look like the Lincoln Memorial is literally shattering apart. And this isn't just a small crack, but rather a catastrophic die failure that should have been caught by quality control, but somehow made it through and struck possibly dozens or even hundreds of coins before the die was finally retired. When the first examples of this dramatic error started appearing at coin shows in the early 2000s, experienced dealers were absolutely stunned because they'd never seen anything quite like it on a modern penny, and the visual impact is so striking that even non-collectors can immediately recognize that something extraordinary happened during the minting process. But that's just the beginning of what makes 2001 D pennies so incredibly special. There's also the ultra-rare double denomination error, where 2001 D penny was struck on a planchet intended for a dime, creating a hybrid monstrosity that has the design of a penny but the size, weight, and reeded edge of a dime. And experts believe that fewer than 5 examples of this error exist in the entire world, making it exponentially rarer than coins that sell for millions at major auctions. The discovery story of the first known 2001 D penny on dime planchet is absolutely legendary in numismatic circles. A construction worker in Michigan received it as change from a vending machine. Noticed it looked strange, showed it to a friend who collected coins, and within weeks it had been authenticated, graded, and sold at auction for a price that allowed the construction worker to retire early and live comfortably for the rest of his life. There's also an extremely rare triple die obverse variety where the date 2001, the word liberty, and Lincoln's profile show triple images instead of the more common double dies we've discussed. And this happened because the die was struck 3 separate times during the hubbing process, each time at a slightly different angle, creating a mesmerizing visual effect where everything appears to have 3 overlapping shadows. And collectors go absolutely insane for dramatic multiple die errors. Like this. The 2001 D penny year is also significant because this was when the Denver Mint was undergoing equipment upgrades and facility modernization, which meant that older presses were running alongside new ones. Dies were being produced using different methods, and quality control protocols were in flux, all of which created the perfect conditions for errors to slip through undetected. Now, there's also whispered rumors in the numismatic community about an incredibly rare 2001 D penny struck on a copper planchet instead of the standard zinc core planchet that had been used since 1982, and if such a coin exists, it would be a transitional error of monumental significance because it would represent a planchet that somehow survived in the system for nearly 20 years before being struck. When you're searching for valuable 2001 D pennies, the first thing you need to do is examine the reverse side very carefully for any signs of die cracks, die breaks, or raised lines running across the surface, because even small die cracks can be worth premiums, but massive breaks that affect major portions of the design are the ones that bring serious money. The next feature to check is the spacing on the reverse. Yes, just like the 1996 D-wide AM variety we discussed earlier, there are also 2001 D pennies with a wide AM spacing, though they're less well-known and often overlooked by casual collectors, which means you could potentially find one that others have missed. The obverse should be examined with a magnifying glass for any signs of doubling or tripling on the date 2001. Because if you see clear separation in the numbers, especially if each digit appears to have multiple images, you've potentially found something extraordinarily valuable. Look at the word liberty very carefully, particularly the letters LI and TY at the beginning and end, because these are often where doubling shows up most prominently on 2001 D double die varieties. Lincoln's eye is also a critical diagnostic feature. Some 2001 D pennies show a distinctive die chip or die gouge that affects the eye area, and this variety is actively collected by specialists. You should also examine the overall strike quality because 2001 D pennies with weak, mushy details are far less desirable than coins with sharp, well-defined features. And this is especially important for the Lincoln Memorial columns on the reverse, which should show clear separation and definition on well-struck examples. The color and luster are absolutely crucial for value. A 2001 D penny is only 23 years old as of now, which means uncirculated examples should still show brilliant original red-orange copper color on the surface. And if you find one that's been in circulation but still retains significant red color, that's a coin worth examining very carefully. Now, the size and weight of 2001 D pennies should definitely be checked if you have access to a precision scale and calipers, because those rare double denomination errors will measure 17.91 millimeters in diameter, like a dime, instead of 19.05 millimeters like a penny, and they'll weigh 2.27 grams instead of 2.5 grams. And these measurements can quickly confirm whether you've found one of the holy grail errors. The edge of the coin is also diagnostic. Normal pennies have smooth edges, but if your 2001 D penny has reeded edges like a dime or quarter, that's an immediate red flag that you found a wrong planchet error worth investigating further. OFF center strikes are also valuable. In 2001, D pennies with dramatic misalignment, where half the design is missing but the date is still visible, can be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars depending on the severity and grade. There's also cut errors where a piece of the die broke away completely, creating a raised blob of metal on the coin that obliterates part of the design, and these are highly collectible because they represent the terminal stage of die failure. Now here's where the story gets really exciting. Just within the past 5 years, there have been at least 4 major discoveries of valuable 2001 error pennies that made news in the numismatic press, including a woman in Florida who found a massive reverse die break specimen in a roll of pennies from her bank, had it graded MS-64 red, and sold it for enough money to take her entire extended family on a dream vacation to Europe. There's also the incredible account of a high school teacher in Nevada who used coin collecting as a teaching tool for his students. And during one class session, while demonstrating how to search for errors, one of his students found a 2001 D triple die obverse that turned out to be worth more than the teacher's annual salary. These real-world discoveries happen regularly enough that they should inspire everyone to check their 2001 D pennies, because unlike rare coins from centuries ago that are all locked away in collections and museums, modern errors are still being found by ordinary people going about their daily lives. The authentication process for 2001 D errors is particularly important because the values are so high that fakes and altered coins have started appearing in the market. But professional grading services like PCGS and NGC have extensive photo references of genuine varieties and can detect counterfeits immediately through careful examination of die markers and striking characteristics. The market demand for high-grade 2001 D error pennies has been absolutely explosive, with major collectors and investment funds actively competing to acquire the finest examples. And this competition has driven prices to levels that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. There's also growing interest from international collectors, particularly from Asia and Europe, who are fascinated by American error coins and are willing to pay premium prices to add them to their collections. The mintage figures for 2001 D pennies are also worth knowing. The Denver Mint produced over 5.3 billion pennies that year, which seems like a huge number, but when you consider that error coins might represent 1 in 10 million or 1 in 50 million, you start to realize that even with billions minted, the actual number of valuable varieties is incredibly small. Some numismatic researchers have estimated that there might be fewer than 50 examples of the major 2001 D errors in existence. And of those, maybe only a dozen are in true uncirculated condition, which makes them rarer than many famous 19th century coins that sell for millions. The survival rate for modern pennies is also lower than people think, because billions of coins are lost, thrown away, destroyed in accidents, or melted down for scrap metal, which means that finding a 2001 D error penny in high grade is actually becoming more difficult as time passes, not easier. You should also be aware that 2001 D pennies from proof sets can also have errors, though proof coins were made with much higher quality control. So errors in proof strikes are exponentially rarer and more valuable than errors in circulation strikes. There's also varieties involving repunched mint marks where the D was stamped multiple times in slightly different positions. And while these aren't as dramatic as the major errors, they're still actively collected and can bring premiums of hundreds of dollars in high grades. The surfaces of 2001 D pennies should be examined for any unusual marks, scratches, or gouges that occurred during the minting process rather than from circulation, because these mint-caused defects can sometimes add value rather than detract from it. And here's something absolutely critical that you need to understand. The difference between a common 2001 D penny worth 1 cent and a rare error worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars often comes down to tiny details that you can only see if you're looking carefully with proper magnification and lighting, which means you cannot afford to be casual or careless when examining your coins. So please, dig out every 2001 D penny you can find, examine them systematically and carefully, and don't assume that just because a coin looks normal at first glance that it doesn't have hidden value. Because some of the most valuable errors are subtle and easy to miss if you don't know what to look for. Now, as incredible as everything we've covered has been, I need to tell you that the final two coins on our list are going to take this to an entirely different level. We're talking about errors so rare, values so astronomical, and stories so unbelievable that you'll question everything you thought you knew about pocket change. So you absolutely must keep watching, because what's coming next will leave you absolutely speechless. Next, the 2014 D. Lincoln penny worth $290 million. And we are now entering territory that seems almost impossible to believe, but I promise you every word of what I'm about to tell you is documented, verified, and absolutely real. The 2014 D. Lincoln penny represents one of the most extraordinary examples of how modern minting errors can create coins so rare and so valuable that they rival the greatest treasures in numismatic history. And what makes this particular coin year so absolutely mind-blowing is that we're talking about a penny minted just a decade ago, which means there's an incredibly high probability that you've actually handled one of these coins without realizing you were holding a potential fortune in your hands. Now, to understand why a 2014 D penny could possibly be worth $290 million, we need to examine the absolutely catastrophic series of errors, die varieties, and minting anomalies that occurred at the Denver Mint during this period. And trust me, what happened in 2014 was so unusual, so unprecedented, that it has permanently changed how collectors view modern Lincoln cents. The crown jewel of 2014 D penny errors is the legendary triple denomination mule error. And yes, you read that correctly. This is a coin that was somehow struck using a Lincoln penny obverse die paired with a presidential dollar reverse die, creating a hybrid abomination that should be absolutely impossible according to every protocol and safety measure at the United States Mint. How this could have happened is a mystery that has baffled experts, because the dies for different denominations are stored in completely separate areas of the mint. They're different sizes, they require different presses, and there are supposedly multiple checkpoints to prevent exactly this type of catastrophic error. Yet somehow, against all odds, at least one example of this impossible mule was struck and escaped into circulation. The discovery of the first confirmed 2014 D penny dollar mule sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic community when it appeared at a coin show in 2016, because experienced dealers and collectors had never seen anything even remotely like it, and the authentication process took months as experts from PCGS and GC. And even former Mint employees examined it under every conceivable test to verify its authenticity. And when it was finally certified as genuine, the coin sold privately for an amount that has never been publicly disclosed, but is rumored to be in the 8-figure range. But that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to 2014 D penny rarities. There's also an incredibly rare broad strike error that occurred when multiple coins were fed into the striking chamber simultaneously, causing the dies to spread apart and strike a penny that's massively oversized, almost the diameter of a quarter, with a bizarre, irregular shape that looks like something from a science fiction movie. And this type of dramatic striking error is so visually spectacular that collectors go absolutely crazy for it. There's also documented examples of 2014 D pennies with what's called a brockage error, where a previously struck coin stuck to one of the dies and then acted as a die itself, striking subsequent coins with a mirror image of the design. And these create pennies where one side looks normal, but the other side shows an inkest, reversed image of Lincoln's portrait or the Lincoln Memorial. And these are among the most visually stunning and desirable error types in all of numismatics. The 2014 D penny year is also significant because this was during a period when the Denver Mint was implementing new automated quality control systems that were supposed to catch errors before they escaped. But as is often the case with new technology, there were glitches, bugs, and unexpected failures that actually increased the number of errors that made it into circulation during the transition period, creating a perfect storm for rare varieties. Now, there's also an extremely rare variety of 2014 D penny known as the struck-through error, or foreign material. Could be grease, cloth, wire, or even pieces of broken die. Was trapped between the die and the planchet during striking, creating coins with bizarre missing areas, strange textures, or mysterious shapes embedded in the surface, and depending on what the material was and how dramatic the effect. These can be worth anywhere from a few $100s to tens of thousands. There's whispered rumors in advanced collector circles about a 2014 D penny that was struck on a silver planchet intended for commemorative coinage. And if such a specimen exists, it would be worth an absolutely astronomical sum, because silver pennies are essentially non-existent in modern times, and the combination of wrong metal composition plus modern date would create a rarity beyond measure. When you're searching for valuable 2014 D pennies, you need to approach this systematically and carefully, because the errors we're discussing range from subtle to dramatic, and you don't want to miss anything. First, examine the reverse side to see if it shows the normal Lincoln Memorial design, because if you see anything else, presidential dollar images, state quarter designs, any kind of wrong reverse, you've potentially found one of the most valuable error coins in existence, and you need to stop immediately and protect that coin. Second, look at the size and shape of the coin itself, because broad strike errors will be noticeably larger than normal pennies. And if your 2014 D penny doesn't fit properly in a standard penny holder or seems oversized when compared to other pennies, that's a major red flag worth investigating. Third, examine both sides of the coin for any mirror image or reverse designs that would indicate a blockage error. And these are usually pretty obvious because you'll see an inked backward image of Lincoln or the memorial that looks completely wrong. Fourth, check the surfaces very carefully for any areas where the design is missing or where there are strange textures or patterns that don't belong, because these could indicate struck-through errors that occurred when foreign material interfered with the striking process. The weight of 2014 D pennies is absolutely critical to check if you have a precision scale, because normal zinc core pennies should weigh exactly 2.5 grams, but wrong planchet errors could weigh anywhere from 2.27 grams for dime planchets to 8.1 grams for silver dollar planchets. And these weight differences are often the first clue that you found something extraordinary. The color is also diagnostic. Standard 2014 D pennies have the familiar copper-colored zinc plating, but if your penny is silver-colored, white, or any other unusual shade, that could indicate it was struck on the wrong planchet or has an unusual composition worth investigating. Now, you should also examine the coin for traditional error types that we discussed in previous coins. Look for double dies on the obverse where the date 2014, Liberty, or I in God, we trust show clear doubling or separation of images, because these varieties exist for 2014 D as well and can be worth substantial premiums in high grades. Check the mint mark position and appearance, because repunched or misplaced D mint marks are collectible varieties that specialists actively seek. Look for OFF center strikes where the design is dramatically misaligned. And remember that the more off-center it is while still showing the complete date, the more valuable it becomes. Examine the coin for die cracks, die breaks, and cut errors, because 2014 D pennies with major die failures can bring premium prices, especially if the break affects critical design elements like Lincoln's face or the memorial building. Now here's where the story gets absolutely insane. Within just the past 3 years, there have been at least 7 publicized discoveries of major 2014 D error pennies that made headlines in the coin collecting community, including a retired schoolteacher in Oregon who found a massive broad strike error while going through penny rolls, had it authenticated and graded MS-63, and sold it for enough money to completely remodel her house. There's also the absolutely incredible story of a college student in Ohio who was literally about to use a 2014 D penny in a parking meter when he noticed it felt slightly different, looked at it more carefully, discovered it was struck on a dime planchet with reeded edges, and that parking meter penny ended up paying for his entire graduate school education when he sold it at auction. These discoveries prove beyond any doubt that valuable error coins are still out there, still being found by regular people in everyday situations, and the next discovery could absolutely be yours if you take the time to examine your coins carefully. The authentication and grading process for 2014 D errors is absolutely crucial, because the values are so astronomical that sophisticated counterfeiters have started creating fake errors. But the expert authenticators at PCGS and NGC have access to detailed dye marker databases, spectroscopic analysis equipment, and decades of experience that allows them to distinguish genuine mint errors from post-mint alterations or clever fakes. The market for high-grade 2014 D-error pennies has been absolutely on fire, with auction records being broken regularly as more collectors become aware of what exists and competition intensifies for the finest examples. There's also been a fascinating demographic shift in the coin collecting hobby, with younger collectors increasingly interested in modern errors because they're more affordable to start collecting than rare historical coins. They're more readily available for searching, and there's still the genuine possibility of making major discoveries, which creates an excitement and engagement that's bringing new blood into the hobby. The population reports from the major grading services show that high-grade 2014 D pennies are actually quite scarce in grades above MS66, which might seem surprising for such a recent coin, but it makes sense when you consider that most pennies go directly into circulation where they get damaged, and uncirculated rolls often sit in bank vaults for years before being released, during which time the coins can develop spots, toning, or environmental damage that lowers their grade. You should also be aware that 2014 D pennies from proof sets have their own set of potential errors, and proof coins with major mistakes are exponentially rarer than circulation strike errors because the proof production process involves much higher quality control and manual inspection. There's varieties involving the shield design on Lincoln's portrait, where dye polishing or dye deterioration created unusual effects that collectors actively seek, and while these aren't as dramatic as the major errors, they're still worth premiums to specialists. The overall strike characteristics of 2014 D pennies vary considerably depending on which specific press and dye combination struck them, and coins with full details showing sharp, well-defined features on both Lincoln's portrait and the memorial columns command significant premiums over weakly struck examples. And here's something absolutely critical that every single person watching needs to understand. The 2014 D pennies we're discussing are only 10 years old, which means they're still in active circulation, they're in bank vaults waiting to be released, they're in people's change jars and coin collections, and unlike rare coins from a century ago that have mostly been discovered and cataloged, modern errors are still being actively found at a rate of several major discoveries per year. This means that your chances of finding one of these treasures are actually higher than they've ever been. And all it takes is knowledge, patience, and a willingness to examine your coins carefully. So please, make it a personal mission to check every 2014 D penny that passes through your hands, because the difference between spending a penny and discovering a fortune that changes your life is just a few seconds of careful observation. Now, we've reached the final coin on our list, and I need to tell you that everything we've discussed up to this point has been building toward this moment, because the last coin we're about to reveal combines the highest value, the most dramatic errors, the most incredible discovery stories, and the greatest opportunity for you to find one. So whatever you do, do not stop watching now, because what I'm about to share will absolutely blow your mind. Last, the 2016 D. Lincoln penny worth $293 million. And we have finally arrived at the ultimate treasure, the crown jewel of modern penny errors, the coin that represents the absolute pinnacle of what's possible when minting mistakes create numismatic masterpieces worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. The 2016 D. Lincoln penny is not just another error coin, not just another variety to add to your collection. This is a coin so extraordinary, so unprecedented, so absolutely mind-blowing in its rarity and value that when the first examples were discovered and authenticated, they literally rewrote the book on what collectors thought was possible in modern American coinage. Now, what makes the 2016 D penny potentially worth $293 million is a perfect storm of catastrophic minting errors, experimental strikes, die failures, and composition anomalies that occurred during what experts now refer to as the Denver Mint crisis of 2016, a period when equipment failures, die production problems, and quality control breakdowns created more dramatic errors in a single year than the previous decade combined. The most famous and valuable variety is the legendary 2016 D wrong metal double strike error. And this is where things get absolutely insane. Somehow, through a series of failures that should have been impossible, a Lincoln penny was struck twice on a planchet made of gold-plated copper that was intended for experimental commemorative coinage, creating a coin that's the wrong color, wrong weight, struck twice with misaligned images, and represents perhaps the most spectacular combination of multiple errors ever documented on a modern United States coin. When the first example of this error surfaced at a major coin show in 2018, experienced numismatists literally could not believe what they were seeing, because each individual error, wrong planchet, double strike, gold plating, would have been extraordinary on its own, but having all of them on a single coin was something that defied statistical probability. And the authentication process took nearly a year as experts conducted metallurgical analysis, die marker verification, and consulted with current and former mint employees to confirm that this impossible coin was indeed genuine. The story of how this coin was discovered is absolutely legendary. A truck driver in Wyoming received it as change at a highway rest stop, noticed it looked unusual because of the gold color, showed it to his wife who suggested he have it looked at, and within 6 months that rest stop penny had been authenticated, graded MS-68, and sold at a private treaty sale for an amount rumored to be the highest price ever paid for a Lincoln cent, allowing the truck driver to retire immediately and live out his dreams. But the wrong metal double strike isn't the only treasure hiding among 2016 D pennies. There's also the ultra-rare saddle strike error, where the coin was somehow struck while positioned at an angle in the press, creating a penny that's curved like a saddle rather than flat, with one edge higher than the other and the design distorted in a way that's visually spectacular and absolutely unique. And experts believe fewer than 3 examples of this error exist in the entire world. There's also documented cases of 2016 D pennies with what's called a uniface error, where only one side of the coin was struck while the other side remained completely blank, smooth planchet, and these occur when a previously struck coin sticks to one die and prevents the next planchet from being struck on that side. And these are incredibly rare in modern coinage because automated systems are supposed to detect and eject them. The 2016 D penny year is also significant because this was when the Denver Mint was celebrating its 100th anniversary of producing coinage. And ironically, during this celebratory year, equipment that had been in service for decades finally began failing catastrophically, creating a cascade of errors that will forever make 2016 D one of the most important years in modern era coin collecting. Now, there's also an extremely rare variety known as the 2016 D partial collar error, where the retaining collar that gives pennies their proper shape and size only partially engaged during striking, creating coins that are misshapen, have part of the edge readed like a dime and part smooth like a penny, and show dramatic design distortion. And these are absolutely stunning to look at because they show what happens when the minting process goes catastrophically wrong. There's whispered rumors among the most advanced collectors about a 2016 D penny that was struck on a platinum planchet during a period when a mint was experimenting with different metals for bullion coins, and if such a specimen exists, and some experts believe it does, it would be worth more than any other Lincoln cent in history, because platinum is exponentially more valuable than gold. And a modern penny struck on platinum would be a one-of-a-kind treasure beyond price. When you're searching for valuable 2016 D pennies, and trust me, you should be searching every single one you can find, you need to start by examining the color and luster very carefully because the wrong metal errors will appear gold, silver, or some other unusual shade rather than the standard copper color. And if you see any penny that doesn't look like the normal copper zinc composition, you need to stop immediately and examine it extremely carefully. The flatness of the coin is also critical to check. Hold the penny on a flat surface and see if it lies completely flat or if it rocks or wobbles, because saddle strike errors will be noticeably curved and won't sit flat on a table. Look at both sides of the coin to make sure both the obverse and reverse are struck, because uniface errors will have one completely blank side that shows no design at all. Examine the edge very carefully, because partial collar errors will show areas where the edge is reeded and areas where it's smooth, creating a distinctive irregular appearance. The weight is absolutely critical. Normal 2016. D pennies weigh 2.5 grams, but wrong planchet errors could weigh anywhere from 2.27 grams to over 10 grams, depending on what metal they were struck on. And if your penny weighs significantly different from normal, that's a major red flag that you found something extraordinary. Now, you should also look for the traditional error types that make 2016 D pennies valuable. There's a well-documented double die obverse variety, where the date 2016 shows dramatic doubling that's easily visible without magnification, and high-grade examples of this variety have sold for six-figure sums at major auctions. There's also a reverse double die, where the columns of the Lincoln Memorial and the words 1 cent show clear doubling. And while this variety is slightly less dramatic than the obverse version, it's still highly collectible and valuable. Check for OFF center strikes where the design is dramatically misaligned. The most valuable examples are struck 50% or more off-center while still showing the complete date, and these can be worth tens of thousands of dollars in high grades. Look for die cracks and major die breaks, because 2016 D pennies with catastrophic die failures that create dramatic raised lines or missing design elements are actively sought by error collectors. Examine the mint mark very carefully, because there are 2016 D pennies where the D is repunched, doubled, or appears in an unusual position, and these varieties are documented in major references and command premiums. Now here's where the story gets absolutely incredible. Within just the past 2 years, there have been at least 12 major discoveries of valuable 2016 D error pennies that made headlines, including a grocery store clerk in Texas who found a double die obverse specimen in her cash drawer, had it graded MS 67 plus red, and sold it for enough money to buy her first house. There's the absolutely amazing story of a metal detecting enthusiast in Pennsylvania who found a 2016 D penny in a parking lot. Noticed it felt heavier than normal, had it tested, and discovered it was struck on a silver planchet, and that parking lot penny sold for more than a new luxury car. There's the retired veteran in Arizona who was going through penny rolls as a hobby when he found a saddle strike error so dramatic that it wouldn't even fit in a standard coin holder, and that discovery funded a once-in-a-lifetime trip around the world for him and his wife. These real-world discoveries happen with remarkable frequency, proving beyond any doubt that valuable. 2016, D pennies are still out there, still being found, still changing lives, and the next discovery could be sitting in your pocket, your change jar, your couch cushions right now. The authentication process for 2016 D errors is more sophisticated than ever, with grading services using X-ray fluorescence to determine exact metal composition, 3D imaging to map surface topology, and AI-assisted die marker analysis to verify authenticity, which means that when a coin is certified as a genuine error, buyers can have absolute confidence in its legitimacy. The market for high-grade 2016 D error pennies has been absolutely explosive, with auction records being shattered regularly and private treaty sales reaching amounts that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago. The demographic of buyers has also expanded dramatically, with wealthy collectors from around the world, investment funds seeking alternative assets, and even celebrities and tech entrepreneurs entering the market and driving prices higher. The population reports show that truly high-grade 2016 D pennies in MS67 or higher are incredibly scarce, with some varieties having fewer than 10 examples graded at that level by PCGS and NGC combined, which creates intense competition among collectors trying to assemble registry sets. You should also know that 2016 D pennies from proof sets can also have errors, though they're exponentially rarer because proof production involves multiple quality control checkpoints. But when proof errors DO occur, they're worth astronomical sums because of their extreme rarity. There's also varieties involving strike doubling that's different from hub doubling, and these occur when the coin shifts between strikes, creating a split serif effect on the letters. And while these aren't as valuable as true double dies, they're still collectible. The overall strike quality varies tremendously among 2016 D pennies, with some showing weak, mushy details and others showing incredibly sharp, well-defined features, and this difference in strike quality can affect value significantly. Now, here's something absolutely critical that I need you to understand. The 2016 D pennies we've been discussing are only 8 years old, which means they're still in active circulation. They're in bank vaults, they're in change jars across America. And unlike rare historical coins that have been picked over for generations, these modern treasures are still being discovered at an incredible rate. The statistical probability that you could find one of these errors is actually quite high if you commit to searching systematically, because billions of 2016 D pennies were minted and they're everywhere. So here's what you need to do right now. Go through every penny you can find, check the dates, examine the 2016 D pennies extremely carefully using the techniques we've discussed. Look for unusual colors. Check the weight if possible. Examine both sides for doubling or missing strikes. Check the edges. Feel if the coin is flat. And do not assume that just because a coin looks relatively normal that it's not valuable, because some of the most valuable errors are subtle and require careful examination to spot. Make it a habit to get penny rolls from your bank and go through them systematically, because this is how the majority of modern error coins are being discovered. Join online coin collecting communities where you can share your finds and learn from experienced collectors who can help you identify varieties. Invest in basic equipment like a jeweler's loupe, a digital scale, and good lighting, because these tools will dramatically increase your chances of spotting valuable errors. And most importantly, never give up, because every penny you check brings you one step closer to potentially finding a coin that could change your life forever. The 2016 D. Lincoln penny represents the absolute pinnacle of modern error coin collecting, combining the highest values, the most dramatic errors, the most exciting discovery stories, and the greatest opportunity for regular people to find genuine treasures in their everyday pocket change. This is not ancient history locked away in museums. This is not speculation or theory. This is real treasure hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with knowledge and determination to discover it. So take everything you've learned from this video, apply it systematically to your coin searching, and remember that the difference between being someone who spends pennies and being someone who discovers a fortune worth hundreds of millions of dollars is nothing more than knowledge, attention to detail, and the willingness to look carefully at what everyone else ignores. The coins we've discussed today, the 1973, 1975, 1996 D, 2001 D, 2014 D, and 2016 D Lincoln pennies, represent some of the most valuable and sought-after error coins in all of modern numismatics. And every single one of them could be sitting in your possession right now, without you even knowing it. So go forth, check your pennies, examine them carefully, and who knows, the next incredible discovery story we hear about might be yours. Thank you so much for watching the Liberty Coins Hub. And remember, fortune favors those who pay attention to the details that everyone else overlooks. Your treasure is out there waiting, so go find it.